A few days ago, I was going through a page online and suddenly a picture came up of a man with so many women around him. And it happened to be Solomon, right? And all his wives. And for some weird reason, the first thing that came to my mind was manipulation. Now, I've never really looked at that story from that angle, right? So I went to dig deeper into manipulation, right? So what is manipulation? It is controlling something or somebody to your own advantage in an unfair or dishonest manner, right? Now, the thing about manipulation is that it's actually very powerful. You know, manipulation is very, very powerful because it gives people a God complex. Let me explain. For instance, if you're able to control somebody to your own advantage and it works out, then you do it with 2 people, you do it with 3 people, 4 people. After a while, you start to feel like you're so powerful, you're untouchable, and that gives you a God complex. Does that make any sense? Okay, so that's what manipulation is. Now, I apologize. I'm going to rush through this because it's a bit of a long topic, right? And there are various types of manipulation, right? There's the physical manipulation. What that would look like is, for instance, faking a whole relationship or a marriage for financial gains, right? Another type is probably convincing somebody that something they saw or experienced never happened. That's gaslighting. It's a form of manipulation. Another one will be something they call a push and pull tactics, which means, so for instance, you're in a relationship, so you're very nice to the person, or friendship, or whatever it is, you're very good to the person for a few days, and all of a sudden you're horrible to the person, and then it keeps them off balance because they're thinking, what did I do wrong? So a lot of people will be walking on eggshells around you because they wouldn't want to rock the boat. They'll be thinking, okay, I don't want to do anything to upset this person, I don't know what upsets them, and it's a form of manipulation and control. So anyway, so those are the physical types of manipulation. There's a different type of manipulation that is a bit more dangerous, let me put it that way. And I feel like I need to say that this topic is meant to inform and not to offend. Reason why I'm saying that is, in some cultures it's a normal practice for them, so it's seen as a norm as opposed to, it's not frowned upon as a form of manipulation, if that makes any sense, right? So this is something they practice normally, so I don't want it to be like I'm casting any aspersions on other people's practices. So anyway, this form of manipulation, the spiritual form, is mainly used, I'll give an example, right? So for instance, let's say a female is about maybe about is at the age of maybe 30 to 35, right? It can happen with men, but it's more common with women. So if she's about that age and she's not married, now the older women around her, maybe her mom, her aunties, will feel like they need to step in to speed up her marriage process. Does that make any sense? To speed things up, because obviously it's frowned upon that at that age she's not married. So a good example, let me give you a good example. True story, right? So there was a lady that told her daughter met somebody, and like a week before then, so her daughter came to tell her that, okay, so I've met somebody now and whatever. And the lady said, okay, so he has a job, he has a house, he has this, pick a date. Pick a wedding date. And she had picked a date like 3 months after that, and she actually got married on that date. Obviously, there's a form of manipulation involved. The downside or the dark side of manipulation is that it changes destinies. Why? Because most of the time our destined path is aligned for us. Now, what happens is that one mistake or one wrong turn can change the path of our destinies, and usually for bad. See, if somebody had told me about 7 years ago that I would be here where I am right now, I would not believe it. I couldn't see it. Now, the thing is, don't get me wrong, I will serve God. I will go to my place of worship, but not at this level, not with this channel. I won't be doing all this. See, one story my mom had always told me that I didn't take seriously, I don't even think she took it that seriously, was that after she had 3 boys, right? So she was desperate for a girl. She really wanted to have a girl, right? So she had traveled. She had taken a trip to a very popular holy city and a well-known place. And obviously she had heard that whatever it is you pray about or you ask for, you usually get it. So she went there and she prayed for a girl, right? And then she kind of made a vow, like, okay, so God, when I have this girl will be totally and completely dedicated to you. True story, right? This child will be dedicated to you. She will serve you for the rest of her life and everything. And the priest around that place said to her that it wasn't really a promise she could go back on, right? And then she said, okay. Now, it was a time where the sex of the baby could not be determined early or whatever it is. And anyway, she had a girl. So, I mean, she had mentioned the story off and on and everything. She had told, in fact, I think I've told a few people about it, but I never really took it seriously. And one thing happened is that somehow the universe conspired enough to bring me to this position. I didn't have a choice. Do you understand? It got to a point where I didn't have a choice anymore. I just had to be where I am now. So what I'm saying is, this is the reason why men ought to pray, because most of the time our destined paths are aligned for us, and a mistake, a wrong turn can change the entire thing for the worse. Now, let me talk about the story of the lady that got married within 3 months, right? Like I said, true story. So this man she got married to already had a fiance, right? And they were working in the banking sector. Sorry, I'm going to try to rush through this because of my time. I don't want it to be too long. So they were both working in the banking sector, right? And they were taking a course in a course. They wanted to migrate, both himself and the fiance. They wanted to migrate to another country to work in the healthcare sector. So they were studying, they were taking a course for that and everything. So anyway, so this man goes to an event and meets this other lady, right? Now, this other lady was also in corporate. She was doing so much better than the man because her position in corporate was really high. So what happened was, obviously, she had gone back to tell her mom or aunt about it, and she had picked a date or whatever. Manipulation got involved, and anyway, what happened was she got a job for the man with the company she worked with, right? Now, the salary was double whatever he was earning at the bank. It was double the salary. It came with a company car. It came with holidays. It was lavish. So what happened was this man dumped his fiancée and he went with this other lady. After about 5-6 years, the company experienced a recession, so he lost his job and it affected him. So he lost his job and everything. Now, his wife became the breadwinner. Obviously. Now, thing is, some women can cope with that, but some women really can't, So the wife became the breadwinner. It started to affect their marriage, obviously. I'm not saying she's a bad person or anything, but maybe the pressure of rent, the pressure of school fees for children, the pressure of taking care of the home. Anyway, they separated. And what I'm saying is this: 3 lives have been affected negatively because of one mistake, one form of manipulation. So these are 3 different people that have been affected. Now, if you ask me, I will say that the man he was probably even in the wrong country. He was probably not supposed to be there at that time, but somebody had forced something to their own advantage that was affecting him negatively. Now, let's look at the story of Solomon, right? So Solomon started out well. I mean, he was humble enough when he became king not to ask for riches and wealth and everything. He asked for wisdom. Now, wisdom is applied knowledge. It helps us make decisions that honor the Lord and agree with the scriptures. And because of that, God went on to bless him with riches and wealth and everything. Now, over time, Solomon forgot his own counsel of wisdom of the scriptures, right? And he went in direct violation to the word of God. Now, somewhere in Deuteronomy, right? So God had given instructions, clear instructions to anybody that became king, that no amassing of horses, no multiplying of wives, no amassing of silver and gold. This is so that the kings would not rely on foreign gods for wealth and everything, So think about it. So somebody that wanted wisdom to be able to honor the word of God somehow started to violate the same word of God. Does that make any sense? Which means there was some sort of manipulation and control involved. Now, let me explain further, right? The women Solomon married were foreign women, they were foreigners, and they had they worshipped foreign gods. So they had different practices that was different from the practice of the Israelites. Does that make any sense? So anyway, let me break it down, right? There's a tribe in Africa. So with this tribe, what happens is that the men, the way they show off their wealth is by how many wives they can marry, right? So a man can have up to like 8 to 10 wives or whatever. It was their tribe, right? It was their tradition, sorry. What happens is that when the women of that community, when they give birth to female children from a very, very young age, they groom them to be able to please a man. Does that make any sense? Because the women are not allowed to work. What they're allowed to do is what they're supposed to do is just to take care of their husbands. So they groom them from a very young age. So from a very young age, they give them all sorts of concussions. They make different incisions in their private areas and everything. So basically, their tradition is pretty much whose manipulation is more potent. Does that make any sense? So it's not frowned upon. It's a normal thing, and these women are not necessarily allowed to marry outside of their tribe. Does that make any sense? So there was a lady, there was a lady from that tribe, right, that met a young man. Now, because her father was rich, she was actually given some form of education, right? So while she was in school, she met a man and they started to date. Now, this man wasn't part of that tribe. He was from another place. Now, because of everything she had been using, or everything that was on her from a very young age, this man almost lost his mind, right? So most of the time, these women practice arranged marriages. They usually promise from a very young age to maybe a wealthy man or whatever it is. So it was time for the lady to get married. Her education was over at this point. So it was time for her to get married, and this young man refused to let her go. Things got so bad. The lady's father got involved, called the young man, was ready to pay him off, or maybe paid him off, to leave his daughter alone. He refused. Obviously, he wasn't doing this with a clear mind, right? So he refused. At some point, the man gave his daughter a lot of security to follow her around so that the man would not meet up with her. Somehow, they still found a way around it. At some point, this man arrested this young man. He lost his job, lost everything. He still refused to let this woman go. Why? Because manipulation was involved. Now, she wasn't intending to do that. It was part of her normal practices, right? So anyway, eventually his family had to get involved because things were getting out of hand. So what I'm saying is, if you relate back to Solomon, the whole point of all this, all the concoctions and all the herbs and all the incisions on their body is to keep their husbands wanting more. So it keeps the man in a lustful state, if that makes sense. Why? Because all the women wanted to be the man's favorite. That was the whole point, so they wanted to be the man's favorite and everything. So they would use all sorts of things, all sorts of incisions, all sorts of herbs and concoctions to keep the man in lust, to keep the man wanting more of them. Now, for somebody like Solomon, he's so wealthy, he's so rich that he could afford, as opposed to keeping a small number of wives, he could afford to keep marrying more wives, and he kept doing that, completely violating the laws of God. Now, God will give him free will to do that, right? However, with 1,000 wives, what time do you think he had to actually do anything else, to actually serve God? Obviously, he got carried away completely. So imagine, he was wise enough to keep them at peace. However, amongst the women, there will be competition amongst them. Each and every one of them will want to be the king's favorite. And they worship foreign gods, which means there will be various forms of manipulation and control tactics amongst them, if that makes any sense. And he had 1,000 of these women. He completely lost it. Now, the downside of that was that, yes, God had mercy on him because of David. However, the kingdom was taken away from his son and given to subordinates. That's the downside of manipulation and control, which is why they say men ought to pray always, because the only approval and validation that matters is that of God and not of anybody else. Men ought to pray when choosing friends. Men ought to pray when choosing relationships. Most importantly, men ought to pray when choosing a life partner, because one mistake one wrong turn can affect one's destiny negatively. Namaste.